of the few things I've studied.
All right, here. Give me the date of the Exodus.
Except I don't remember the Exodus or King David's reign.
1446.
I know King David.
Gonna turn. Yeah, we'll go
I
there.
don't know King David.
Well, it's the easiest one. You got it.
No, I didn't have it written down.
All right,
so I
Jason,
just
you want to
didn't
steal?
study.
Keep track of your score. Yep, 1,000.
Oh, yeah.
All right, Jason, you still get your own. When did Tiglath-Pileser III of Assyria attack Israel, making it a vassal state?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Somewhere between 1,000 and 0.
All right, Jim, you want to steal?
733.
Yes.
Why did
Or,
I have 732?
Yeah, I thought it was 2.
Okay.
yeah, no, both of those are acceptable. Nicely done. Ross, how about the destruction of the Northern Kingdom? Yes, we've got some visitors again.
Wow.
Thank you, kiddos.
Mine.
It's 6 something, right?
No, 7. And these, as we get into, well, you're probably reading, if you guys have read the intro for Jeremiah and Lamentations, I mean, you just start reading this stuff over and over again because it's so relevant to so many Old Testament books. And so these really are like awesome to get down. All right, Jackson, you get your own. How about Sennacherib's failed siege of Jerusalem?
Is it 708?
No. For the steal.
701.
You got it, Trent. 701.
Final answer.
And I don't know why I put BC on that one, not the others. But and who was the king? You guys remember?
Hezekiah.
Yeah, Hezekiah. Nice job. And let's see. Next up, Nineveh falls to Babylon. And who is it? Trent? I think it's Trent. Nineveh is the capital city of what country?
Assyria.
Yep, Assyria. Trent, you remember the date?
6. 29.
Zach.
612.
Boom. Got a point, Zach. And let's see, the Battle of Megiddo. Zach, you get this one too.
609.
Nicely done.
You are not playing games.
Girl, I know some dates.
And Zach, who was the southern king that got killed at the Battle
Josiah.
of Megiddo? Yeah.
Hey,
Nico killed him, right?
And Josiah.
Nicely done. Yes. Very good. All right. Who are we up to? Did you get yours yet? Or was that a steal?
That was mine. I stole it and then got that.
Okay. Jason, first exile of the southern kingdom by the Babylonians. Attack and exile.
5 something.
No.
I don't know.
Jim, you want to steal?
605.
Well done.
South Dakota, maybe. I remember
And the second one?
595.97.
Oh, you're racking up points now. Ross, you got the third?
586.
Nicely done. Third and final. And how about, let's see, we're in Jackson now, I think. How about Cyrus? Of what country? What country was he the king of?
Persians.
Yep, the Persians. They defeated the Babylonians, and then they made a decree that set the captives free. How many years does Jeremiah, we read Jeremiah, how many years did Jeremiah say that the Jews would be in captivity for? Yep, 70 years of exile, captivity. And the date for this decree?
530.
Yeah, or you could say 538. He probably defeated the Babylonians in 539 and then made the decree a little later. But so you'll see both of those dates sometimes. Temple. So they go back. You guys remember they go back. They rebuild the altar under whose leadership? Anybody remember? Anybody? Yep, Zerubbabel. Read through Ezra and Nehemiah, and we know that the temple work got stalled out because of opposition, and then Haggai and Zechariah, their preaching, motivated people to begin rebuilding the temple again, and it was finally completed in what date? Who's up? Trent?
I think this was the 70 years after 586, so 516.
Nicely done. 516, yeah. So,
Does 515 work for that too?
I
Can't remember.
probably. I've never seen that. I've never seen 515, but since you could probably find some historian that would say a year.
Just scratch that. I thought I had that, but I
And so you can remember, as a part of that, just remember that I think the temple work was started back up in 520. I believe it was 530 when it stalled out. You could go look at your paperwork to double check, but restarted. Just to that'll give you a little bit of a grid for understanding Ezra and Nehemiah. Let's see. Ezra's mission. Zach?
458.
I don't know. What do you guys?
You're going to say, someone's going to say it, and then you're going to say, that's what I was going to say. You better take your guess.
No, I mean, it would be a completely random guess.
All right, Jim, you got it?
445.
Nicely done. And remind us, somebody, what was Ezra's mission?
Why did I had 445 or 435 down. Am I wrong?
Yeah.
I was taking notes whenever we were going through before.
Oh, I don't know.
I might have missed it.
I'm not sure. I don't remember ever thinking 435 in my life.
445? Okay, cool.
Yeah, Ezra went back to teach the law. And what did Nehemiah do? Went back to do what?
Did the law, Nehemiah did the wall.
Nice. How many days did it take for the wall to be rebuilt? 52, yeah. All right. Who got the most points? Anybody get 4? Jim, did you get 4?
Yeah, I got 4.
Nice. Anybody else get 4?
I think I got.
Zach got 4. Tiebreaker. All right. It's just for fun. Nobody really cares who wins. Zach,
Anything.
okay, let's see. I don't know what other date I have. All right, how about who can say better? Okay, we'll do it a speed. Who was Naomi's husband?
Boaz? What am I thinking? No. That was really dumb.
Elimelech. No, that wasn't dumb. I do that all the time. I have to think through which is which. All right, you didn't get that. You remember that Ruth was Naomi's daughter-in-law, but who was the other daughter-in-law?
All these names mixed up.
Who knows it? Orpah. All right, how about this one? Who was the first major judge? He was also the cousin of Caleb. Othniel. All right, Zach wins again. Jim, you got ripped off twice, probably just because of the lag in the video. So I should come up with a better tiebreaker.
Oh, well.
This guy got it.
I need my cheat sheet, or I won't get it right.
This is where I get last, but that's where it evens out.
Really, you haven't worked on the Kings too much yet.
Nope.
Oh.
Kings and days.
I try to memorize like 2 to 3 lists and
Well, you're doing well. You're working hard on it. But where did my list of Kings go? Oh man, I'm a mess. I was probably.
I got it.
Give me just a second. I was probably working on it in the other room.
the second batch pop was really good too. There's a little more sweetness. I must have heard. They're watching on the broadcast.
Can they watch? Can people watch live?
If you send them the link.
Was the second better than the first?
Yes.
Do you guys have one of those big bowl things that have some wire?
Yeah. It's pretty fun. All right, let's do the Southern Kingdom since we did Northern last time. See how far we get. All right, well, we'll go around the room again. Jim, if you can do it in order, that'll be ideal. I don't have them numbered in my sheet, but if you can't do it in order, just give us any one and we'll see if we can work it in there.
We're doing Southern Kings.
Yeah.
So number 1 is Rehoboam.
Yeah. Jim, do you remember anything about Rehoboam?
No, I spent so much time memorizing lists.
I know it. It's brutal. Yeah. Yeah, Solomon's son. And remember that he took the advice of the young men to make life harder on everybody. Can you guys see the whiteboard or not?
Florida.
Yeah, I mean, there's a glare you're not gonna fix. Yeah, a little bit.
All right. Years into his reign, took all the gold out of the armory, the gold shields. Anybody remember it? Shishak is his name. Ross, do you have the next king?
Abijah or Abijam.
Yeah, it's about him.
That's exactly right.
Might not be worth trying to memorize this stuff, but he stood on top of Mount Zemarim and called on Israel not to fight against God's people, called on the northern kingdom not to attack the southern kingdom. And then God defeated Israel in their large army, and 500,000 of them died. But, Jackson, you got the next one?
Asa.
Yep, Asa, nicely done. And Asa, was he a bad king or a good king?
Bad.
He was one of the good ones. I mean, he had bad things about him. You know, a lot of the good ones were pretty mixed in that, he put Hananiah the seer in prison, inflicted cruelty on the people. His feet were diseased, and he didn't seek the Lord. And so it was pretty bad, but he still, I think in Second Chronicles or First Chronicles probably, gets some good marks. Maybe it is Second Chronicles. Trent, you got the next one?
Jehoshaphat.
Yeah. What do you remember about him? Good guy or bad guy?
Not so great. No, maybe he's actually pretty decent.
Yeah, he was one of the good ones, though, so many of them, he had some negatives about him, too. Anybody remember the negative on Jehoshaphat? What did he do a couple of times? He went into cahoots with the northern kingdom. So he made peace with Israel, and so remember at Ramoth Gilead, he went to battle with Ahab, and Ahab was killed. He went in disguise, Ahab did, but the random archer got him. Remember the prophet that told him that he was going to die? What was his name?
Micaiah.
Yeah, nice job.
That's cool. He's kind of sarcastic.
Micaiah.
Right? Wasn't he the guy?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's like, oh, yeah, sure, you'll be fine. Stop lying to me. You always lie to me. Okay, fine, you're going to die. Yep. So Micaiah prophesied the line. Remember that God allowed a lion spirit to come and to be in the mouths of all the prophets. And then he also allied with, who comes after Ahab in the northern kingdom? Ahaziah. He also allied with Ahaziah to build ships. And they were destroyed at Evian Gezer. Again, the Lord showing that he really didn't want his people, and we'll see this, of course, in Jeremiah, didn't want his people allying with other nations. Let's see, Zach, you got the next one? Jason? Jim?
What are you on number after Jehoshaphat?
Yep.
We have Jehoram.
Yeah, Jehoram or Joram. Either one
Right.
work for me. Now, what terrible thing did he do? He married. What evil woman did he marry?
Ooh, Jezebel.
No, she's in the northern kingdom. This is the daughter. The daughter of Ahab and Jezebel. So you're on the right track, Zach. We sometimes call her bloody
Athaliah.
Athaliah. Ross.
Is it Ahaz?
It gets so confusing for me. I think I could get these lists down a lot better, except that there's northern kings that are Jehoram and Ahaziah, and they reigned at the same time, so it's just a nightmare to try and remember which is which. But Jehoram and Ahaziah didn't rule very long. He was murdered by, remember who killed him? This guy killed, on the northern kingdom, he destroyed the Omride dynasty, and he killed the northern king and the southern king kind of at the same time. Yeah, Jehu. Jehu killed him. He's a good guy to remember. Driving like Jehu, he drove furiously. Yeah, yep. And Jackson, you know who comes next?
Athaliah.
Yeah. Jehoram and Athaliah, and then how did she become queen? Kind of an interloper. Shouldn't have been queen or put her on the list of kings, but what did she do to become queen?
Killed all the royal family.
Yeah, killed her entire family, except who?
Did I say?
Yeah,
Joash.
Joash, yeah. And he was a baby, and one of, I think Athaliah's daughter or something like that, spared him and hid him away. Jehoiada was the priest. That she, I wish I remembered her name right now for sure. But, and Joash served the Lord all of his days until Jehoiada died, and then Jehoiada's son became priest. I think it was Zechariah. And Joash ends up having Zechariah, that's who it is, killed. And he wasn't following the Lord at that point. So see how important prophets, priests are to keep the king in line or to keep other people in line as well. Who's next? Anybody remember?
Is it Amaziah?
Amaziah, yes. And he was, so Joash, we'll call him. Amaziah was kind of good. And then Jackson, who comes next?
Azariah or Uzziah.
Yeah, Azariah, better known as Uzziah from Isaiah, right? Isaiah was prophesied during the reign of Uzziah, so we always remember Isaiah's great call story, and Uzziah is a part of that. But what's kind of the negative? Uzziah was a good king, reigned for a long time, but what was the big negative thing that he did? Anybody remember? He went into the temple and tried to offer incense, and the priests ushered him out. You know, they're kind of manhandling the king, and he became angry at them, and then leprosy broke out all over him, and so he had lifelong leprosy on his forehead. And think about those priests. What a terrible thing to have to confront the king and to force him out, and you don't know if you're going to live if you're, pushing the king out. But they were brave and courageous, and the Lord vindicated them in that. And Trent, I think you're next. Yeah. We don't know a whole lot about and then who comes next, Zach?
Don't know.
This is the guy from the Syro-Ephraimite War. You got
I
it?
got a guess.
Jason,
I don't know.
go for it.
Is it Jehovah? I know it's
No.
close in there.
Yeah, that name's in there. I mean, the part. Ahaz, yeah. Remember, we can just think for a minute. Remember the two kings that wanted Ahaz to join their coalition. When he didn't, then they attacked Israel. What were their names? Anybody? Ross, you got it? Jackson? Yep. Pekah of Israel. Yeah. Rezin of Syria. Yeah, nice job. This is the Syro-Ephraimite alliance was right here. And they attacked the southern kingdom, attacked Ahaz, and then Ahaz, what did he do in defense? It was a dumb thing to do. What country did he pay tribute to?
Assyria.
Assyria, yeah, with an A. So he bought their support. So Assyria attacked the alliance and, whittled Israel down to basically just Samaria and the land around it. But then they laid heavy tribute on Israel, on Judah too, on Ahaz. And so it ended up being a bad deal all around. It was a big mistake. And what king comes next? Whoever's up next, I'm forgetting. Ooh, Jason, are you up
I
next?
think it's Jim.
Jim? Who comes after?
Hezekiah.
Yeah, so we have a bad king, and then we get a good king again. Hezekiah. Remember anything about Hezekiah, Jim, or anybody else?
Hezekiah. He's
I think in the book of Isaiah, there's kind of two fun stories about Hezekiah. The one was Sennacherib's failed siege of Assyria in what year again? 701.
Probably.
Sennacherib comes along, and sometimes this story sounds better for the Jews than it was. I didn't get that right at all, but Sennacherib did a lot of damage to the southern kingdom. He attacked the 46 walled cities in Judah, marching up, trying to get to the nerve center, to the head, as it were, which was Jerusalem. And so, I mean, he did a ton of damage in the countryside and on these fortified cities. In fact, when you read the book of Micah, we haven't had much time in the minor prophets yet, but Micah gives us, as you read through it, it says, "Tell it not in Gath," and then it's got a number of other cities. And we think that Micah is tracing the steps of Sennacherib up to Jerusalem. He's naming the cities that Sennacherib attacked and destroyed. And so Sennacherib destroys these 46 walled cities and the Judean countryside on his way to Jerusalem. And then Hezekiah prayed. There's probably more to it than that, because we know he had sent a lot of money to Assyria to trying to get Assyria's help, and not trying to get their help, but trying to buy them off so Sennacherib wouldn't attack them. But that didn't work. They kept marching, and so finally Hezekiah prays. And what happened to the Assyrians? Yeah, killed. Yeah, 185,000 died. Pretty cool. And then what happened to Sennacherib? Anybody remember? He went home, and then
His sons killed him.
yeah, in the temple of his god Nisroch. His sons, what were their names? Adremelech and Esarhaddon, I think it was, killed Sennacherib. What's that?
I said no one ever killed him.
Their names. Why did you name me this? Yeah. So really, really brutal. And then what's the other story about Hezekiah?
Is it that he prayed for,
Ross, remember?
was it 10? I don't remember.
15, but 10 factors in because that's how many, to prove it, that's how many steps that the shadow of the sun moved backwards. 10 steps to prove that God's word would come true. Now, I was reading a little bit more about this today, and God also promised that the Assyrians wouldn't defeat the Jews at the same time. So even though this happens after, in the text comes after the failed siege of Sennacherib, we think that it's a little out of chronological order in the Bible, that Hezekiah probably had this prayer experience first, because as a part of it, God promised that the Assyrians wouldn't defeat them. So that's kind of interesting. I guess a reminder that the historical narratives aren't always designed to be chronological, but sometimes they're put together thematically. All right, who remembers who's next? Who said Hezekiah?
Yeah.
Okay, Ross, what comes next?
Man, I think it's a J name.
There's no king worse than him, but kind of like Ahab, at the end of his life, he repents too. I don't know what to make about those repentance stories. I mean, the whole exile is linked to Manasseh, but yet, he repented, which was cool. And Jackson, who comes next? Ammon. He's a hard one to remember. There's only reigned for like 2 years. And Trent, you have the next one?
Josiah.
Yeah, Josiah. What do you know about Josiah?
He's a good king. He found the book of the law when he was 18 years old.
Nice job.
Deuteronomy specifically. He tried to establish all sorts of religious reform. He did. He ended up dying at the Battle of Megiddo when he was trying to stop the Egyptians because he sided with the Babylonians.
Yeah.
How old was he when he found the book?
Yeah, that's the one thing. I think he was 12, wasn't he?
No, he was 18. I read it in the book.
No. Okay. I didn't have it written down.
I had 12 or 13.
He started to reign at 8 years of age. By age 12, he brought religious reform. I didn't have the age down, so I guess he was initiating some reform before he ever found the book. I'll jot that down. Hey, you want to throw me my pen, Zach?
I could be wrong, but I thought I remember reading 18 years old.
You're probably right.
I'm curious because I thought I remember reading that he was 13, and then I'm like, dang, this 13-year-old kid is like, we all need to repent. Like, read the Bible, man.
Yeah. Well, and I think Ryan, when I listened to the video, when he taught, pointed out that these guys, Joash reigned when he was 7, Josiah when he's 8. Fairly plain and obvious that he had some counselors, advisors. I'm sure they were still playing in the dirt and making mud pies and till they could come of age to be able to make independent decisions. And let's see, Zach, who comes next? These last 4, you guys probably know from Jeremiah. This is, everything's spiraling out of control when we get to these last 4.
Is it Joy?
Yeah. Nice job.
It's Josiah's son that he got taken.
Yeah, Jehoiahaz. So it helps me to just remember about the history a little bit. So we've got the Battle of Megiddo, 609. Josiah dies. The people make Jehoiahaz the next king. The Egyptians, they go on to battle the Babylonians. They do not defeat the Babylonians. They kind of get their tails kicked. But as they're making their march back home to the west, then they are going to replace Jehoiahaz and put a puppet king, someone that's going to be loyal to them. So then who comes next? Anybody remember? Jehoiakim, yep, becomes king. So this guy only ruled for 3 months, I believe. And then this guy rules for a while, but then Babylonians are going to defeat the Egyptians again in 605, and they don't want an Egyptian guy to be the king. So they're going to replace him with who? Yeah, Jehoiachin. And so now this is, let's see, 3 months, this guy, Egyptian for a while. It's hard to keep track of all this, but this guy was Babylonian, pro-Babylon, I think. And then Jehoiachin, he's, should I get this right? He's gonna change his allegiance to the Babylonian from the, it's hard for me to keep track, but they go back and forth between Egypt and Babylon, and so the Babylonians are gonna attack in 597 and put the last guy on the throne, which was Zedekiah. So he's pro-Babylon for a while, until he finally rebels against Babylon, stops paying tribute, and so the Babylonians come and attack. And Zedekiah, remember how it ended for him?
Poke his eyes out.
Yeah.
His sons, all that stuff.
Killed his sons in front of him, forced him to watch, gouged out his eyes, took him captive to Babylon. And so this is all, I'd like to get this mastered a little better, but I think the big thing to remember is that they kept wavering back and forth between Babylon and Egypt. And so that's why Babylon kept attacking in 605 and 597 and 586, because they would keep going back to Egypt, and then they would come to put somebody different on the throne that would be loyal to Babylon. So finally it ended in demise. A reminder that God never wanted his people to form alliances with other nations. It always went badly for them. He wanted them to depend upon him. And who knows how history would have worked out if they had depended upon God.
It would really take a lot of faith, man, to not trust in all the flesh and pay your way out. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like our faith is little. You know what I mean? Like, you look at Hezekiah's situation. I'm like, that dude, that's crazy. They're scary. You know what I mean? Like, did you see that little video?
I haven't watched it yet.
It's really good.
I will.
But just like we had to read in the Atlas thing, or the ESV, the Green Book, they're scary, man. Like, they would be really bad,
Yeah, it's easy for me to read in Isaiah and think, well, why didn't you just trust the Lord kind of thing?
Yeah.
But when you think about the nitty gritty of it and already seeing all these cities fall.
Lakish and stuff.
Yeah,
I mean,
Lakish
they're
was a
taking
major.
everybody out, executing them. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, it's crazy.
And it could be your wives and children soon. And for
I
sure.
mean, like I said in that book, he stripped the gold out of the temple trying to pay him off and everything else. It's like this was a desperate hour.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's do, Zach, you think you can rattle off all the judges in order? No looking.
Yeah, maybe. I studied them, but I also had a card with 6 and not the 2, so I think I got it. Deborah, Gideon, the one with the J. Now that we said Jehoshaphat,
It gets so much harder, yeah. Now you're doing great.
J. What was the J one? I don't remember.
Jim, remember the judge that starts
Jephthah?
with J? Ooh, close.
I don't have the judges down yet.
Jephthah.
Yep.
Jephthah. And then I think after Jephthah, was that Eli? And then
One more.
I said Deborah, Gideon. Did I say Gideon yet?
I think you did.
Then Jephthah.
Othniel, Ehud, Deborah, Gideon, Jephthah.
I know it was Samson.
Yep, that's it.
And
Othniel,
then-
Ehud, Deborah,
and
Gideon,
then
Jephthah,
Eli
Samson,
and-
Eli.
And then Samuel.
Yeah, nice job. Really good job. You are getting those nailed. Ross, you want to walk us through the characters in the book of Ruth?
Sure, you might have to tell me if I miss any, but
So many details to try and sort out.
Like the one I'm so there.
This is a tough one.
Elihu is the, yeah,
Yep.
last one. Zilphar,
Zilphaz.
um,
No, it's Zilphaz. Eliphaz.
okay.
Eliphaz. Yeah, I don't know why I said
Yeah,
Zilphaz.
you,
Eliphaz, yeah.
Um,
You can call on a friend if you want. Got it. Good job. How about,
and I wrote that down as we were going over this. Just-
Yeah, that's what I mean. It really helps
Yeah.
using the pen.
Yeah, oh, for sure, yeah.
What I'm doing.
Trent, this is going to be a little bit of a change of pace. What three genres did Longman give for the Psalms? Not Brueggemann. He mentions Brueggemann's categories, but Longman.
Joy and lament, and joy, lament, and
Nicely done.
or I always want to say hymn, but I don't think it's a praise. No, is it?
You can call on a friend.
Jason?
Yeah, that's what I would say. Him and praise are the same.
Call on.
Thanksgiving and joy were the
What,
same.
who knows it? Yeah, Thanksgiving. Lament, joy, and Thanksgiving. And let's see. Jason, how about Brueggemann's genres that he gives? These are my favorite. I mean, the genres are kind of a man-made
Okay,
construction to
that would
help
be
us to think through it.
That would probably be the one with him. This one, right? But not.
No, they're kind of different. You want to call on a friend?
Ross.
is that the one that was orientation?
So Walter Brueggemann is the one that gives the other categories.
And they were orientation, disorientation, and what?
Reorientation. Yeah, so you can think through about every psalm that way. Now, there's some of them where the ship never really gets righted. You know, they're left in a state of confusion. Some of them, they start out confused and end up righting the ship.
I remember Mike spent a decent amount of time on that, the different genres that people had. So
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I didn't get to spend, he covered Job and Psalms. All right, Jim, there are some Psalms, 120 and 134, that we call songs of ascent. Why do we call them that?
I don't know.
You want to call on a friend?
Yeah.
Do
Do I have to pick a specific friend?
Oh, yeah, that's the fun part.
Okay, Jackson.
Like going out to Jerusalem and like as a pilgrimage, like
Yeah.
they would be singing as they would sing those songs as they go out because it was the hill. So even if you live even higher, you'd still have to go there and still go up to the temple.
Yeah, if you guys didn't catch that, Jerusalem's on a hill, so no matter what direction you're coming from, if you're going to Jerusalem, you always have to go up. And as they would make this pilgrimage, they would sing these psalms. So they're called songs of ascent. And there's some psalms that where the psalmist calls down curses and judgment upon his enemies. Let's go, Ross. What do we call those psalms?
Imprecatory. I preached on one of those last week. I had contacted.
1st and 2nd Samuel. Talk through these for a second. I can find my sheet. Anybody, you guys want one of these, you can sure have it. I think you already have one, but. So, all right, Zach, tell me about Asahel.
Don't know anything about it.
Jason?
Joab's brother, they got the blood of the spear stuck through him and could run like a gazelle.
Yes, nicely done. And he was, along with his brothers, they were called the sons of who? Jim, remember these three brothers were the sons of who? Who was their mom? Ross, you got this one? Jackson? Yeah, Zeruiah, or I may not be pronouncing that exactly right. Sometimes you get it stuck in your head for so long. Keep saying it wrong, but yeah, the sons of Zeruiah. So it's Asahel, Abishai, and Joab, of course, the three sons of Zeruiah. Let's see. How about Jim? How about Ishbosheth? We haven't talked much about Ishbosheth. Any idea who he is?
No.
Ross?
I don't remember.
Jackson?
Saul's general son.
Saul's son, who became king after him. So he reigned for a short time before the wheels fell off. But how about Trent Abinadab? You know that one?
Abinadab. I do not.
That is the Uzzah and Ahio's dad. And there's a bit more about him, I think, but I would maybe have to look up to refresh myself. But Zach, tell us who Uzzah and Ahio, who they were.
I don't remember them either.
Jason? Jim?
No idea.
Uzzah? Ross? You got Uzzah? Jackson? Uzzah? Ahio, that's Uzzah's brother. I don't know where. I should have had some references. We could look it up real quick. Written down. I don't have it. But, so Uzzah's the one that touched the ark and was killed.
Oh, yeah.
Ark was traveling on the cart. Well, that's hard. You get 1,000 things thrown at you. And then Obed-Edom. You guys remember anything about Obed-Edom? That's the household where David left the ark, and then Obed-Edom was being blessed so much that David thought, I better get that ark and bring it to Jerusalem. And so he tried again. This time, putting the poles on the shoulders of men, and they carried it the way they were supposed to. Prior to that, I'm kind of remembering now, Abinadab. The ark had been with Abinadab at Kiriath Jearim, and then his two sons were helping to move it. Uzzah died, and so it got left at Obed-Edom. How about Mephibosheth? I don't know whose turn it is. Trent, how about Mephibosheth?
That was Saul's crippled son, or
Close.
The nephew?
No.
Cousin?
Grandson, yeah. Saul's grandson, whose dad was Mephibosheth's?
Was Jonathan?
Jonathan, yeah. So Jonathan's the son of Saul. Mephibosheth is the son of Jonathan. And why did Mephibosheth end up being treated well by David? You guys remember?
When everyone was following his son or whatever.
Did David make a vow?
He was the only last living line of Saul, so he wanted to bless Saul's family.
Yeah, Jonathan. Yep. It was his. He had made a vow to Jonathan. Remember, they had made a covenant together. Made a vow to Jonathan that he would treat his descendants well, and he realized he hadn't made good on that vow. This is later in the reign of David, and so he found Mephibosheth and gave him lots of stuff and let him eat at his table. And then when when David's son Absalom made a coup against him. Mephibosheth actually, remember that he remained in Jerusalem, and David was upset about that. He said, "Hey, how come you didn't follow me out of Jerusalem? Why'd you stay back?" And it was Mephibosheth's. It was his servant Ziba who said, Mephibosheth actually was hoping that you would die and he would become king after you. So then, David was really ticked off. But Mephibosheth denied it and said, no, I'm a cripple. I can't leave Jerusalem. And so David initially had given everything to Ziba. And then when he heard Mephibosheth's side of the story, then he split the estate down the middle. And Mephibosheth said, whatever, you can take it all. I don't care, just so long as you're back, alive. And so.
I wonder if he fired that servant.
Yeah, I imagine there was a little ongoing conflict that. Anybody remember? I guess this is Uzak Nahash. Anybody remember Nahash?
So, be the guy told him to poke out the right eye and make a deal with him, Saul, like against Saul and all that.
Maybe. Well, not Nahash. It might have been Hanun. Nahash was a friend of David's. He was the Ammonite king. Remember?
Maybe it's Nabish or something.
Or no, not.
Something.
And then Nahash died, and then Hanun, his son, sent to David and. No, David sent to Hanun to wish him well, and Hanun took it as offense. And remember, he split the breeches of the messengers and shaved half their beards. And then they came back to David, and David said, well, hang back for a while until your beards grow back. And it was a great offense. That was the Ammonites. It was the Ammonites that attacked Jabesh Gilead too. So I don't know, was there a king with that, Jason? You might be right. First Samuel 11 or so. Yeah, you're right. Nahash the Ammonite went up and besieged Jabesh Gilead. Bingo. Double points for you, Jason. And then apparently became friends with David later. All right, how about Uriah, Jim? You remember Uriah?
Uriah was... My brain is shut off.
Fair enough. It's like a fire hydrant, kind of trying to sift through all this stuff. Uriah the Hittite, maybe that'll jog your memory. Ross?
That is one of David's.
Sure, sounds great. Build the temple. And then the Lord later spoke to Nathan and said, no, I actually don't want David to build the temple. And Nathan had to go back to David and tell him that he wasn't the one to build the temple. Trent, how about the next Tamar, Amnon, Jonadab, and Absalom?
Tamar was David's daughter, who Amnon raped, and Jonadab is the guy that convinced Amnon to do it, and Absalom killed Amnon.
Nicely done, nailed it. Yeah, 4 points right there.
What was the name of the guy that killed?
Absalom would stand at the city gate and tell the people how he would rule if he were king, and he's just ingratiating the people himself to the people and winning over their hearts while David was at the palace, and so he was able to throw a coup against David.
So just Absalom, or no, was Amnon Bathsheba's son, or which of those three were Bathsheba's, or were any of them?
I don't
know if it matters.
No, I'm not sure.
Solomon was from Bathsheba.
Yes. Yep. I think Absalom was from Bathsheba too, if I'm not mistaken. Anybody know? That sound right?
Who was it that went to Bathsheba and wanted her to let David marry somebody?
I think, yeah.
Oh, okay.
He was not Bathsheba's. He was from David's other wives. Sure.
Yeah, Adonijah wanted to marry Abishag. Abishag was the young lady who slept with David to keep him warm when he was really old and cold. And so she apparently, being married to her was some kind of a political move. I mean, she was beautiful too. And so Adonijah went to Bathsheba to try to get Abishag as his wife. And that's when Solomon went off the handle, when Bathsheba made that request to Solomon and said, well, what, are you going to give him the whole kingdom? And then he said, he's gone too far, and that's what led to Solomon killing Adonijah, that request. Didn't turn out well. How about Zach Amasa, remember him?
It sounds familiar.
Jason, Jim, Amasa, Ross, Jackson. Amasa was the commander of Absalom's army. So you probably remember. Oh yeah, I started on the back page. I'm like, how come I haven't talked about these guys yet? But probably remember that Joab ends up killing Amasa because David, after the coup was put down and Absalom's killed by Joab with 3 javelins through his heart, David offers an olive branch to Amasa, accepts him into his army, makes him the commander of the army, but then Joab kills him.
Yeah, both on the route after that, isn't he?
Well,
Or like,
not yet.
Joab does a few things and just nothing happens.
And Joab was, he had a lot of power. David, sometimes it seems like David's tolerating a lot, but Joab was probably really powerful, and hard to just dismiss a guy that's that powerful. Benaiah, I think this one's yours, Jason.
yeah, he's a mighty man.
Commander
Couple
of
different things.
Commander of
Yeah.
whose army?
Well, Solomon's.
Yeah.
Later on.
Yeah.
He was David's like bodyguard, leader of the bodyguard.
Yeah.
When it hit on a snowy day. Lion.
That is a cool story. And yeah, he was the one that killed Joab as he was holding onto the horns of the altar. Let's see, Shimei, Jim, Ross. This is the guy, Jackson. Anybody? As David was fleeing Jerusalem when Absalom had rebelled against him, this is the guy that was throwing rocks at David. He was a descendant of Saul's, and he was mad. The Bible goes way out of its way to point out that David was innocent in the death of Saul and the death of Abner and the death of Saul's sons, and he was faithful to Mephibosheth. Goes out of its way to show that David was very kind to Saul's family and wasn't the one that brought about their demise. But Shimei didn't take it that way. He felt like David had killed those guys, and so he was cursing him, throwing rocks at him, and David's men said, "Oh, let us kill him, David." And David said, "No. If I'm meant to be cursed, the curse will land on me. If not, it'll fall off of me." Which is what the Bible tells us in other places. But then later, at the end of David's life, he's going to command Solomon to kill Shimei, and so Benaiah ends up killing him.
How is that name spelled, Andy?
Shimei. And I may be pronouncing it wrong. I wish I was better at pronouncing all of these names, but someday. I think that's how ESV Online says it, but how about, what's that?
It's kind of cool how they always have those big name guys do that, I don't know, killing of those significant people. Like he had Joab killed significant people, and Benaiah. You would think those guys would be more like order giving rather than do the dirty work.
They had to do the dirty work, yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I haven't really thought through that. How about Zadok? Ross, Zadok ring a bell for you?
Name, I had nothing more than that.
Anybody have Zadok?
I knew the priest.
Yeah.
He was on one of the sides when they were. Was he on Absalom's side?
Zadok is,
I don't remember. He was on the side.
yeah. I remember, when the word came against Eli, and he was told that the only one of his descendants who would survive would survive to weep his eyes out. We remember that that was Abiathar, the only surviving priest from the slaughter at Nob. And so Abiathar became the high priest of Saul's. And then when David became king, Abiathar was the high priest, but Zadok became like a co-high priest. And in the early chapters of 1 Samuel, in that prophetic word against Eli, it says that God would raise up a faithful priest. And we know ultimately that was Jesus. But that faithful priest finds its first fulfillment in Zadok. So Abiathar and Zadok were co-high priests. And then, like I think you were pointing out, Jason, Abiathar sided with Adonijah, and Zadok sided with Solomon. And so that was when Abiathar got banished from the priesthood, was after siding with Adonijah. How about Jackson, Ahithophel, and Hushai? Remember those guys?
Sure.
Trent? Got it? Zach?
I wrote this down a while ago, but wasn't Ahithophel and Hushai was like two guys that were basically the double agents in that whole dynamic?
Yeah, Hushai was the double agent.
Oh.
So Ahithophel was, he sided with Absalom, and Hushai stayed loyal to David. And when Hushai went to David, and David said, well, you'll be more helpful to me if you go to Absalom and, confuse them. And so Hushai gave Absalom bad advice. Everybody listened to Hushai rather than Ahithophel. Ahithophel knew it was bad advice. He knew that it would lead to the end of the coup and that he himself would be executed in the end. And so he beat David to the punch and he hanged himself. Ahithophel did. And so Hushai was the double agent. Ziba, we talked about, the guy that was Mephibosheth's servant. Sheba led a rebellion, and then Abishag was the young lady who slept with David to keep him warm. And if we turn to the front page, we started on the back page. Let's see. We talked about Elkanah. Who was Elkanah? Zach? Might help you if you look down to Elkanah, Hannah, and Peninnah.
Yeah.
We're back at the beginning of 1 Samuel now. Yeah. Jason, you remember the story?
Hannah's husband.
Yeah.
That said, "Am I not enough?" Remember?
Right.
For 10 sides.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
said that to Miranda so many times.
Have you really?
No.
Be funny.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hannah's barren. Who was Peninnah, Jason? That's Elkanah's second wife
Oh, yeah.
that he probably took because Hannah was barren, and Peninnah mocked Hannah because of her barrenness, and so the Lord vindicated Hannah. She's praying in the temple, of course, for a child, and Eli takes her as a drunk woman and rebukes her, and she has to explain what's going on, and Eli says, well, may your prayer be granted, and it was granted, and she gave birth to Samuel and brought him back a couple of years later to the temple to serve. And Hophni and Phinehas, Jim, remember who those two guys were? Ross?
Those are the sons of Eli, right? That were immoral.
Yep. Bad guys. Ichabod was Phinehas's son. What did Ichabod's name mean, Jackson?
Glory has been. It's gone.
Yeah, something along those lines. No glory, the glory's departed, the glory's gone. And what was the circumstance of him being named, so named?
The Ark of the Covenant was taken from the battle. Hophni and Phinehas were killed in that battle, but that wasn't until Phinehas's wife heard that the Ark was taken that she just died there.
Yeah, in childbirth. Yeah, so she gave birth to this child, named him, and then she died upon hearing, like you said. And then Eli died similarly. Yeah, the text tells us he heard about the loss of the battle, heard about the death of his sons, heard about the loss of the ark, and it was at that piece of news, like you pointed out with Phinehas' wife, when he heard that, he fell over backwards. He was overweight and old, and he broke his neck. How about Trent? Do you remember who Joel and Abijah? Remember who they were? Abijah?
I don't.
Sons of who? Anybody remember?
Hophni?
No, and we probably haven't talked. What's that?
Samuel.
Yeah, they're Samuel's sons. And we don't really know much about them except the only thing we're really told is that they didn't know the Lord. And so it's kind of sobering to remember that even the great Samuel, who we really don't have anything negative about Samuel, other than this piece of information that his sons didn't know the Lord.
Would they technically be the last judges? I mean, doesn't it say something like, not that they did it very well, but don't they say that they judged Israel, or is that not?
I'm not sure.
I just was thinking of.
Yeah,
I think I wondered that too.
We
Like
do.
for years, it says 40-something years, or I mean, years. You know, like it wasn't like 2 weeks.
I don't know.
Good, Jason.
Oh, 1 Samuel 8. Yeah, when Samuel became old, he made his sons judges over Israel. Nice catch. The name of his firstborn was Joel, the name of his second, Abijah. They were judges in Beersheba, yet his sons did not walk in his ways, but turned aside after gain. They took bribes and perverted justice. Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah and said to him, behold, you're old and your sons do not walk in your ways. No point for us a king. Yeah, and I guess when they would be the last judges. Then like when we rattle off the 8, we're talking about the major judges, but yeah. And Samuel must have been the judge also. Yeah. They were maybe in a different location in Beersheba. The judges, there would have been more than one judge at any given time. They had kind of geographic regions, and some of those regions might have even overlapped, and sometimes they would go on the circuit and go around to different places. So these judges weren't ruling over a united kingdom of 12 tribes, but there'd be various judges, and some of them would become more powerful, like Samuel, and the other judges that we've learned. Saul, Jonathan, Abner, commander of David's army, or of Saul's army. Who was Agag? Ross, remember Agag?
I don't.
King of the Jackson?
Amorites, or is it Amalekites?
Amalekites, yeah. And how did he die?
Samuel.
Yeah, Samuel hacked him to death because Saul spared him when Saul was supposed to have killed him. Agag, the Amalekites had been devoted to destruction by the Lord, and so they weren't to show any mercy to them. They weren't to keep any of their animals, but they did. And so that was one of the climactic low points, as it were, of Saul's life. Merib and Michal, Trent, remember who they were?
Merib was the oldest daughter of Saul that he withheld from David, and Michal, his daughter, offered.
Yeah, nice.
It's got to be someone David killed or something.
Jason? No. Jim? Dave, you might remember he's the one that killed the priests at Nob.
The guy that heard the secret.
Yeah, he was there when David received the bread of the presence, as we read about in Mark 2 earlier. And he was from Gath. I don't know if he was a giant or not. I don't recall that he was, but he was who, when David was on the run from Saul, he went to Achish for protection. The Philistine, of course. And when Achish's men said, "Isn't this David? The guy that's killed lots of us?" And then David realizes that things are not going well, and he started to act like a madman. He started scratching on the door, frothing at the mouth, and Achish says, "What do I need another madman for? Get him out of here." And so David through a little subterfuge, saved his life. Later, David battles with Achish, and so they must have gotten on friendly terms again. David apparently thought they would be on friendly terms already. But Abigail and Nabal, anybody remember? I guess those are our last two. We've already talked about Zeruiah. How about Abigail and Nabal?
She eventually became David's wife. Nabal was her horrible husband, and he didn't bless David. David got really ticked off, and Abigail came out and pled for mercy and showed her virtue. David's like, "Oh, you're awesome. I'm gonna marry you," and probably after Nabal died, preferably.
Yeah. Where Nabal was had some kind of condition where he was like frozen for 10 days, like he got paralyzed or something, or comatose, or something weird. But yeah, nicely done. And of course, it's a virtuous woman. We get an example, lots of examples in Scripture of this. So, David went off the handle. He's angry. He's ready for revenge that was way out of proportion to the offense, and it's Abigail who calms him down. It's maybe a reminder to us to marry well. For those of you who aren't married, you want a wife that's going to make you more virtuous, not less virtuous. All right, let's take a breather, and we'll come back and we'll jump into Jeremiah and Lamentations. That's sons of Zeruiah. I always say Zeruiah, but Jackson probably has it more correct. You remember Joab, Asahel, and Abishai were
Sons of
so she is their mom.
Okay.
And she was also a half-sister of David's. So they're all his nephews.
So she was the daughter of Jesse.
Or,
Yeah.
I think it's one of the Ammonite kings, isn't she?
How is she David's half-sister?
Is it by guesses?
Yeah, I don't know. Someone who's got Wikipedia? I'll look her up real quick while we're on break. It's hard to sort through all that stuff.
Like mom.
Well, it's possible that Jesse's wife had first married to Nahash. Scholars think that Nahash is a typographic error based on the appearance of the name 2 verses later. That's more than I can sort through right now, but
I always hear half sister.
Men walk in and they just don't want to smile.
I'm with you on those carrots.
Uh-huh.
I'm with you with these carrots.
That's right.
I don't really eat carrots on my own, but like, oddly I do here.
They're so dusty and dirty, and hard to clean, and just the stage looks bad, you know, like I don't know. So they've wanted to try to create some different lighting options.
Do you play any instruments?
Air guitar.
Yeah.
Pretty good at air guitar.
Yeah. Well, I would love that. I don't want you to. I don't want to try and clip your wings and keep you close just because we're greedy. But greedily, I want you here. So.
I'm happy to leave and come back too.
Yeah. All right. Looks like we lost Jim. Maybe he'll come back. We'll tackle Jeremiah, and then if we have time, we'll maybe go backwards and talk a little bit about Proverbs. Isaiah, we kind of covered a little bit on the board with the Kings, Isaiah. Everyone got that done? Ross, did you get the textbook reading done? Did anybody, how much time did you guys get to spend in the text? Were you able to skim through at least? So we didn't get much time in the text. All right. Well, how about the textbook? What were your guys' takeaways from that? Or if you did read some of the text? You can talk about that.
Quick question, Andy.
And you guys are very welcome to skim through that. You know, I think there's, to me, like especially, you know, maybe the first half of the book or the first quarter of the book, I think there's value in us reading it just to kind of be a little bit familiar with the sorts of discussions that critical scholars are having about the text, just to be a little conversant with it, or, you know, if anyone starts asking those questions, you know, probably what you guys have taken from it, this is what I've taken from it as I've read through it a number of times now. In the end, it's like, well, yeah, you know, well, especially with sources, that's maybe another question other than authorship, but, you know, the sources is, you know, there maybe are some different sources, but at the end of the day, we can't really discern what they are, and God's given us a finished product, and so, you know, we receive it as is. And, you know, just knowing that much, I think that's an answer to give to people if this sort of thing ever comes up. And in terms of authorship, yeah, I guess you can just know that critical scholars are going to question the authorship of about every book, and know that their arguments aren't all that convincing, and there's responses to those arguments. So That's the best I've got for an answer. Totally cool if you want to skim through it.
Okay.
Josiah was 12. He began a series of religious reforms that led to the discovery of the book of the law in the temple when he was.
Nice.
So according to this book's
Well,
not infallible.
If we're going to go with this book, no, that's great. I'm glad you caught that.
Where was that, by the way?
Bottom of 323.
Yeah, first sentence of that. Second sentence of that paragraph.
Ah, very helpful. Thank you. That clears up my memory.
Where's where you read 12?
Go through it.
It's the beauty of reading it together and talking about it. We're able to sort through things a little better together. Well, we can start walking through the book. I've got this handout for you guys to fill in. You have that too, right, Ross?
I do.
Awesome. And as you guys want to talk about things, we can stop and talk, and we'll make our way through this book. So the major prophets are so called simply because they are longer. Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit, but just to remember that. In some ways, maybe they're more significant just because there is so much more info there, but that's not saying that the other ones are unimportant or minor or inferior, that sort of thing. The historical background we've already talked a lot about today. Jeremiah covers the reigns of Josiah. Probably he was very young when Josiah was king. And so it largely covers the last 4 rulers of Judah. And you guys already know these guys: Jehoahaz, Jehoiakim, Jehoiakim, and Zedekiah. And I've got in parentheses for you there, son, son, grandson, son. So you can see that it really didn't, as awesome as Josiah was, and as much reform as he led, one generation later, the kingdom would be gone. And so things really unraveled quickly for the nation of Judah. And great Assyria was declining. Once oppressed nations of Egypt and Babylon began asserting their independence and their imperial ambitions. And so, they're kind of trying to grab the leftovers. They want to get these nations that Assyria had been receiving tribute from and dominating over. Now, Egypt and Babylon, they want to become the superpower, and they want to claim those places for themselves. And so Judah's just being caught in, I think the book calls it, cross currents and riptides of Egypt and Babylon as they're trying to gobble up the pieces that Assyria has left.
Just to make sure I understood what you were saying earlier, when we were going through the kings, you said Jehoiakim was like an Egyptian. You mean he was like loyal to
them? Yeah.
To them.
Yeah.
They were all the same, whatever.
Yeah.
Ethnic.
Yep. They're all Jews, all descendants of Josiah, sons of Josiah, except the case of Jehoiakim. Yeah, I was trying to remember, and I didn't do a very good job. Their loyalties between Egypt and Babylon, but
Okay.
Jehoahaz was made king by the people after Josiah died. Egypt, as they made their way back from getting defeated by the Babylonians, they replaced Jehoahaz with Jehoiakim. Then the Babylonians kicked some more tail on the Egyptians, and then they replaced Jehoiakim with Jehoiakim. Jehoiakim gave his allegiance, that was in 605, he gave his allegiance back to Egypt, and so the Babylonians came again in 597 and replaced him with Zedekiah. And then Zedekiah rebelled against Babylon, and they came in 586 BC. So lots of stuff going on. Of course, the next one is Josiah. In the midst of Assyria's decline, Josiah was able to make reforms and assert power in the region. So it was Assyria's decline that really enabled Josiah to make all the changes that he was making. And you guys know that Josiah's death at Megiddo, yep. In 609 BC, his son Jehoahaz, became king. Keep reviewing this stuff. Hopefully it'll stick. We kind of talked about all this already. After 3 months, Pharaoh Necho replaced him with Eliakim and changed his name to Jehoiakim. Then the next bigger paragraph, when the Babylonians remember who their king was? Nebuchadnezzar. Defeated the Egyptians. They attacked Judah in 605, forced Judah to shift their allegiance to Babylon. In 601 BC, Jehoiakim switched his allegiance back to Egypt, refusing to pay tribute to Babylon, which led to the Babylonian siege of Jerusalem in 597 BC. Jehoiakim died during the siege. We're not really told how he died. Perhaps it was assassination from the inside, but Jehoiakim died during the siege and was replaced by his son, Jehoiakim. He's 18, ruled for 3 months, taken captive, replaced with Josiah's son Zedekiah, age 21. So these guys are really, really young. Imagine trying to rule at such a tumultuous time at 18 or 21. It's kind of unbelievable.
That's probably exactly what Egypt and Babylon wanted, though, just a pawn.
Yeah, for sure. These guys are pawns, making foolish decisions. And then, of course, you guys know the Babylonians took Zedekiah captive, forced him to watch his sons murdered, and then gouged his eyes out. Then you guys remember who the Babylonian captain was? It's not Nebuchadnezzar, but this is, kind of the commander of their army.
It starts just like Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah, Nebuzaradan. Nebuzaradan. Yep, Nebuzaradan. So the Babylonian captain, he appoints Gedaliah as governor of Judah. And Gedaliah is a Jew. But Gedaliah, the next blank again, was shortly assassinated by, anybody catch? I know you didn't get a lot of time. Catch who assassinated Gedaliah? His name's Ishmael. And Ishmael wanted to prevent a non-Davidic ruler from ruling Judah. So he was maybe had some good intentions in a way, but not the right thing to do. Now there's this other guy. His name is Johanan. And out of fear, he disobeyed Jeremiah's prophetic word and led a group of leading Jews to flee Egypt, taking Jeremiah with them. And so this is after Babylon's has destroyed Judah. They've established Gedaliah as governor. Gedaliah gets assassinated by Ishmael, and now Johanan, he's kind of the leader of the remnant, and he's fearful. And he wants to just go to Egypt and get out of this crazy situation and all the dangers. And Jeremiah said, don't do that. If you go to Egypt, pestilence will follow you there, and bad things will follow you there. And they were supposed to remain in the land, the Jewish land, and to rebuild there, but he didn't listen, and they took Jeremiah with them, forced him to go with them. So Jeremiah ends up dying probably in Egypt. And then we get at the end of Jeremiah 2 that after 37 years of living as a prisoner in exile, Jehoiakim was freed from prison by the Babylonian king Evil-Merodach and treated kindly, being given a place at the king's table. Kind of an interesting anecdote.
Can you spell that?
Yeah, that's a mixture on the spelling on the paper.
Evil, what's that?
You misspelled Jehoiakim. You said kin. You keep saying kin. Is it kin instead of chin?
Well, so often in the Hebrew, it's a hard CH sound. Now, we anglicize some words, and, so if you want to say chen, I suppose you can.
So this one is the CHIN one, not the.
Yeah. Yeah, did I make a mistake somewhere?
You put KIN. So.
Oh, sure. Where's the KIN? Maybe it's not in mine. I might have corrected mine.
Yeah, that's what I was.
No, sorry, yeah, it's CHIN, same one. I corrected mine because I caught it and didn't correct that one.
And then, yeah, did you want
And
to know?
sometimes it does show up as a K. Yeah, evil Merodach is evil, just like the word evil, with a dash. And then it's Merodach. And sometimes you see the different spellings a little bit, but Merodach. Looks beautiful. That's amazing. All right, the prophet. We'll see. Maybe you guys will remember some of the stuff. Jeremiah was the son of who? Hilkiah is his father's name. Hilkiah of Anathoth. That's where Jeremiah was from. And yeah, any questions or comments or input, you guys can jump in at any point. You guys remember so many prophets had these calls. Remember Isaiah's call, the hot coal being put on his lips, and Jeremiah he was called by the Lord too, but he balked at his call, claiming he was too young and that he couldn't speak. But the Lord said to him, "Behold, I have put my words in your mouth. See, I've set you this day over nations and over kingdoms to pluck up and to break down, to destroy and to overthrow, to build and to plant." God commanded Jeremiah to remain, you guys remember what? He was told to remain single and celibate. And this was to be a sign of God's judgment upon Judah. The destruction of Jerusalem would be awful for women and children. It was no time to have a wife or to have children. So this is a sign to God's people. And we think of Hosea, of course. Remember what God told Hosea to do? Yeah. Marry a prostitute to be a symbolic sign. And Isaiah, his kids got names that were, portents, symbolic portents. So sometimes family weep over those who were killed, just kind of as a show of God's own indifference, not indifference like we might think of it, but this judgment points is set, and there's no sense weeping.
Andy, what was the first word there?
Funerals.
Oh, okay.
Quite a bit. I didn't read it especially closely. You guys maybe caught it. I think it mentioned that, kind of its placement, Jeremiah and Lamentations close to each other, shows us what the early folks thought about the authorship of Lamentations. And then, of course, the next one, Jeremiah is known as the what prophet? Yeah, the weeping prophet. Chapter 9, verse 1.
The Lord told him not to weep.
To weep and
Right.
Disobedient prophet.
Yeah, I never thought about that. Yeah. He says, "Oh, that my head were waters, and my eyes a fountain of tears, that I might weep day and night for the slain of the daughter of my people." And so maybe that's his way of saying, look, God told me not to cry, and I wish I could cry. It's called the weeping prophet, and Lamentations, of course, is such weeping over the destruction of Jerusalem. So. And who was Jeremiah's close associate, his partner, his amanuensis?
Wasn't Hosea, was it?
Nope.
Baruch.
Yep, Baruch. Baruch, Baruch. You guys remember what an amanuensis is? Well, you want to say what it is?
Just someone who writes what someone else tells, like
Yeah.
Jeremiah would dictate.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So when you get to the New Testament, Paul had an amanuensis. Sometimes, at the end of Galatians, he says, because that was kind of an exceptional moment in the letter where he's writing with his own hand, but normally he would have an amanuensis. And so Jeremiah did too. In this call to Jeremiah, God told Jeremiah that he would make him into you guys remember, a fortified city. Yep.
City's there on ours.
Oh, it is? An iron, is that there too?
Yeah.
Oh, I see, I got you. Yeah. An iron pillar and a bronze wall. And so God was going to give Jeremiah the support he needed. And we can think, of course, there's probably a sermon in there for us. Think about our roles as pastors. It is hard. It's going to be hard. I mean, it is so painful when you have somebody that you're close to that doesn't like you anymore and says things that you don't think are true. And the church, it's so incredibly painful. You guys probably have already tasted that, some of you a little bit. And we can be reminded that when God calls us, He gives us the strength we need to. And it's going to be hard, so we're going to have to push through. It's going to be painful, but we can do it by the strength of the Lord. All right, the next page, unless you guys have anything you want to talk about. It's kind of hard when you guys haven't read through it recently and kind of blasting through some stuff here, but the men of his hometown of, you guys have already seen this once. What was his hometown? Jeremiah's? Yeah, Anathoth, or however you might want to say that. But so this is a little bit of a description of the persecutions he faced. The men of his hometown of Anathoth and even his own brothers conspired against him. Maybe think about Jesus a little bit here. A little bit of a prefigurement of the sufferings that he would endure. So he had lots of opposition. And did you guys catch kind of what the central message that Jeremiah had was? That's the next paragraph here. Probably fill in the blanks and figure it out. But I mean, why was he persecuted so much?
Babylon.
Yeah.
The time for couldn't change what was happening. The judgment was going to come, and if other prophets were saying that.
Yeah, you nailed it. Then there's kind of a common refrain in here of what the false prophets were saying: peace, peace. You know, they kept saying that there would be peace, and it's like, no, there's not going to be peace. Sorry. And so think about I have here that Jeremiah was declaring the destruction of Jerusalem by the coming Babylonians, and he called on the people to surrender and build a life in Babylon. He says, surrender to the Babylonians. You'll sit under your own vine. You know, life in Babylon can be okay. And of course, you remember from from Jeremiah 29, that pray for the peace of the city that you're going to, right? Because and their welfare is your welfare, and so there's this expectation that life won't be so bad in Babylon. It'll be decent, or even good. And so his message was working against the purposes of the king. They were in contradiction to the false prophets who proclaimed peace. So, we've talked about this before with the prophets, that so often they're speaking truth to power, and there's always false prophets, and in our day, there's these people too that will try to just line up with the king or the president's policies, and they'll try to be a supporter of those policies and tell the king whatever he wants to hear and tell the people whatever they want to hear. But the true prophet or the true preacher is going to declare the truth of the Bible. And we've got to do that in sensitive ways. We're not. Some of us may be called to be like Jeremiah, but we don't kowtow to a king or to a president or to the elders of the church if they're in the wrong on something. We can't just say, okay, well, whatever. Or we want to speak the truth. And of course, that brings lots of suffering into our lives. I've got some examples here I could read a little bit about just to get a feel for this this message that the Babylonians were coming and that there wouldn't be peace. 5:12, they've spoken falsely of the Lord and have said, he will do nothing. No disaster will come upon us, nor shall we see sword or famine. So that's the message of the false prophets. 5:31, the prophets prophesy falsely, and the priests rule at their direction. My people love to have it so. And so you think about prophets are prophesying falsely, the priests are following in line with them, and the people are cheering them on. And we think about, we can even think maybe about popular preachers that we think are really far off base. And people love to hear that message, and that kind of keeps those preachers going. And so, the fault lies with the prophets, with the priests, but also with the people, because they've got itching ears, as Paul puts it in the New Testament, that want to hear false teaching.
Yeah, I actually was thinking about that this morning, so I've been reading it in the morning, it's like, you always see that connection. That comes up several times. I only read 8 chapters in Jeremiah. It comes up, It's like there's always that connection. Just like even the promise in Jeremiah 3 on the reverse of that, I will give you shepherds who will feed you with knowledge. You know what I mean? Like on the gracious side of those who are obedient. You know what I mean? You think about practical application ministry and stuff, you're like, wow, anywhere you go, if you're a faithful shepherd, it's like, it's God's got people there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, I was thinking about that verse too, and just thinking about how you guys, if you're faithful, you're the fulfillment of this promise, faithful shepherds. This probably finds its greatest fulfillment, and maybe not its greatest, maybe that's yet to come, but a great fulfillment in the New Testament era of pastors that are faithful to shepherd their flock. And so, you can think about yourself as a fulfillment of Jeremiah.
Question 2. So the false prophets that are saying peace, peace, like they're saying don't submit to Babylon, right? And so they're really saying, are they saying pretty much like God's going to be like he was in the rest of the Old Testament? He's going to deliver you, stand your ground. And, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Which, in one context, you might think, oh yeah, that sounds
if they were
good.
obedient,
Right?
It would be great.
Yeah, right. And so they, the next one, read a little more, 7:4 says, "Do not trust these deceptive words. This is the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord." So apparently that was a repetitive refrain they kept saying. And you can imagine, right? You've been feeding on the story of Hezekiah and the failed siege and Sennacherib's failed siege, right? I mean, he walked all the way up to the door of Jerusalem practically, and the Lord turned him back. And so they had this idea of the invincibility of the temple. They felt like as long as the temple stands, that's the footstool, right? The Ark of the Covenant, Lamentations makes a reference to this, is like God's footstool. He's not going to let his footstool be destroyed. He's not going to let his temple be destroyed. Of course, Jeremiah is going to remind them over and over again about Shiloh, right? So there's kind of some competing images there. One of Hezekiah and temple won't be destroyed, but then Jeremiah, look at Shiloh. Look how it was destroyed, and God can do this too. 8:11, they have healed the wound of my people lightly, saying peace, peace, where there is no peace. 23:16 through 17. Do not listen to the words of the prophets who prophesy to you, filling you with vain hopes. They say continually to those who despise the word of the Lord, it shall be well with you. And to everyone who stubbornly follows his own heart, they say, no disaster shall come upon you. You could maybe even think, the closest New Testament kind of parallel that comes to my mind is 1 Corinthians 6:9 through 10, where the Apostle Paul says, do not be deceived. The unrighteous will not inherit the kingdom of God. Neither the sexually immoral, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor men who practice homosexuality, nor thieves, nor the greedy, nor drunkards, nor swindlers, nor revilers will inherit the kingdom of God. And think in our day of people that would try to deceive us and say, oh, you can live any way you want and still go to heaven because God loves you. And that sounds so good, and we're maybe really accepting of people that are living together or whatever it might be. And that sounds so wonderful and loving, and yet those are really smooth and deceptive words. If we let our people think that it's okay, that no disaster will come upon them if they live that way, because surely disaster is going to come upon them unless they repent, in this life and especially in the next. And so I think Jeremiah can be a really powerful book for us as pastors to remember our job, our roles as pastors to speak the truth and with love, of course, but to speak it not less. Jeremiah 27:14. Do not look. 29:28. Shemaiah summarized Jeremiah's message this way: your exile will be long. Build houses and live in them. Plant gardens and eat their produce. Shemaiah didn't like that message. That's what he described it as. Or the last one, 38:2. Thus says the Lord, he who stays in the city shall die by the sword, by famine, and by pestilence. But he who goes out to the Chaldeans, as another name for the Babylonians, there's some historical nuance of who the Chaldeans were, but nonetheless, it says he shall have his life as a prize of war and live. So that's the recurrent message in Jeremiah, is surrender to the Babylonians. That's not what the king wanted the people to hear, because he doesn't want to surrender. He wants to keep being the king. So the next paragraph, it's false prophets promise peace. The prophet, remember which prophet it was that broke Jeremiah's wooden yoke? His name was Hananiah. And Jeremiah had built this yoke, of course. You guys know what a yoke is, right? I know Trent does. Trent, tell us what a yoke is.
It's like a whip that you. I'm just messing.
I'm like, what in the world?
I was just gonna make a joke. He assumed I knew. It's that thing you put around like ox's necks that you can control them with, and it binds them.
Yeah, two of them can pull together if they're yoked together. So yeah, the yoke here that Jeremiah wears is the yoke of Babylon. Then Hananiah comes along and breaks the yoke, kind of a forward thing to do. And God delivers the word that in the place of the wooden yoke, there would be an iron yoke. And Jeremiah's prophetic word was fulfilled that Hananiah would die. He died that same year. So, this is kind of a recurrent theme of false prophets. There's a number of false prophets named in Jeremiah. I think it's helpful to know these names so that when we encounter a false prophet or someone who opposes us for no good reason, we can remember, there was Hananiah and Shemaiah and Pashur that Jeremiah had to endure, and now I'm having to endure too. And we'll face these sorts of people too. But the great thing is that we see that God is continually vindicating Jeremiah. He's got to go through terrible things, but God vindicates him, and God brings an end to the opponents and the false prophets.
Oh, that's just you know what I mean? I can't remember his name, but anyway, you know what I mean? He's zealous, but he's totally a false prophet,
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, it's like the beasts in Revelation. One of them comes out of the land, and one of them comes out of the sea with seductive words, deceptive words. Yeah, some of them are smooth and charming and sound so good, and others of them are just, like you say, violent.
Yeah, because some of them don't even care. I mean, you think of the Joel Osteens, and he don't care.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, smooth like butter. Well, the priest Pashur, P-A-S-H-U-R, had Jeremiah beaten and put into stocks for a day, and then the Lord changed his name, Pashur's name, to Terror on Every Side, because he would become a terror to himself and his friends.
Pashur.
Yeah. Yep.
What was the second
one? Terror on Every Side. Is that the second? Which one are you looking for?
The Lord changed Pashur's name to...
Yeah, Terror on Every Side. Kind of like a Native American name.
Okay. Runs the boats.
Yeah, right. And the priests and the prophets attempted to have Jeremiah killed, but some officials, and especially Ahikam, A-H-I-K-A-M, refused to have him killed. They protected Jeremiah. And, there's going to be this other guy down at the bottom that pulls Jeremiah. Ebed-Melech is his name. We'll get to him, but pulls him out of the muddy cistern. And, it's important, I think, for us to remember, too, that God has people everywhere. And even though, maybe there's so many corrupt people in a government, there's still people who can be faithful in government. And we might find supporters as pastors in unexpected places. I think even of King Ahab. Remember when he wanted to kill Elijah? And there's Obadiah who's serving King Ahab. And Obadiah, while he's serving, he's this high official in Ahab's government. Obadiah hid 50 prophets in one cave and 50 in another cave, and he was delivering food to them. And God puts people in places. Or you think of Daniel, who was serving, really terrible kingdoms and kings, and yet he was able to remain faithful to the Lord. And so there's a theme throughout the Old Testament of how to live a faithful life in a pagan culture or in evil cultures or whatever. And so it seems like it is possible. We might find unexpected support and godly people in unexpected places. Next up, it's the false prophet Shemaiah, who sent letters to people, including the priest Zephaniah, calling on him to rebuke Jeremiah. Judgment was pronounced against the false prophet and his family, saying they wouldn't live to be old, something along those lines.
He sends Zephaniah as a book.
I don't think so. Yeah, that gets confusing when there's so many names that there's multiples of. Jeremiah was banned from the temple. That was apparently where he went, the temple precincts, to be able to communicate his prophetic messages. And so he commanded Baruch to go to the temple and to read the words of his prophecies in front of all the people. And this Jeremiah scroll, Baruch, takes the scroll he's reading. His scroll's taken and read to King Jehoiakim. And as it was read, Jehoiakim fearlessly had columns of it cut and burned in the fire, increasing his guilt and punishment. And he demanded that Jeremiah and Baruch be seized, but the Lord hid them. So God brings his support in interesting ways. I've been meditating over First Timothy 4 for a long time of Paul saying, the Lord stood by me and strengthened me, that I might preach the message to the Gentiles. And he says, I was rescued from the lion's mouth, and the Lord will rescue me from every evil deed and bring me safely into his heavenly kingdom. And we think about how hard life is as a Christian, how hard life can be as a pastor. And yet, if we'll keep our eyes on Jesus, he's gonna deliver us. He's gonna support us. If we're doing what God's called us to do, he's gonna give us the strength we need. And, there's days we don't feel like going on, and yet we get deliverance. And Jeremiah is hid by the Lord. He's protected by Jehoiakim. Ebed-Melech is gonna pull him out of the cistern. And so much trouble, so much danger, and yet so much support. And you can expect that too in ministry. So don't give up too soon. Then, Ebed-Melech is this story. You guys remember that story? Jeremiah gets thrown into a cistern. Ebed-Melech says, hey, we better go get him out of there before he dies. And so he sends 30 men to go rescue him, pulling him up by ropes. They put cloth under his armpits so that he doesn't get hurt. I heard a sermon once talking about how I think it was referencing Christians maybe pulling other Christians out of danger, but doing it gently, like the cloth under. Because if it's illustrative, fine. But
Maybe not a bad message, but not the right scripture.
Yeah, right, exactly. All right, any questions? All right, let's go to Jeremiah's visions and actions. I'm doing a lot of talking tonight. No essay questions. So you guys gonna have to talk about
So Ebed-Melech was that one there.
Yeah, he was a good guy. Rescued Jeremiah and rewarded by God.
Wasn't he a chief of the eunuchs or something crazy?
Yeah, I think he was.
The chief of the unit.
He was.
Well, he's an Ethiopian. No, I think it sounds right.
was. Turn off the broadcast.
Oh, man. I don't know where it is.
Only you would go out of your way to memorize the, chief of the eunuchs. Who was that?
By the way, a eunuch, yeah, I mean, we all know, Jackson, you know what a eunuch is yet? An official, yeah.
Cut your thingies off.
Not you, yes, testicles.
Testicles, yeah. Not your finger.
Right, to clarify.
Now let's stop.
Yep. Yeah, the Ethiopian eunuch of the New Testament, yeah. Or Daniel's, some of Daniel's friends were made eunuchs as they were brought into Babylon. So the chief of the harem, the harem, all the king's wives, the harem would like do beauty treatments on these ladies, and so they were always eunuchs, so that wasn't a threat to the king in any way. So kind of a rough deal. They were high officials, these eunuchs that were, castrated for those purposes. But then, sometimes, this is where it gets a little nuanced. A eunuch could sometimes not mean a castrated man, but it could be a reference to a high official. And so it's not always certain that when there's a reference to a eunuch that they were actually castrated, though certainly some of them were. But
there's an opening at RCC, I heard, for a eunuch.
Are you applying or what?
I heard it.
I'm gonna.
It's a promotion for this guy.
So what's the difference between a eunuch and a unicorn?
Oh man, this is just like trying to explain to middle schoolers circumcision.
Never mind. It's not stupid. It was. I just saw this movie a long time ago. This was years ago, and it made. I don't know. This foreign country came in. This was 1,000 years ago, and took all the people, and they took this guy and smashed him into junk, and I was like, "That's real." You know what I mean? Because they don't want him to produce and stuff like that, and they just dominated him. Like I was talking about the Assyrians, I was like, "That is insane." You know what I mean? Take your wife and kids and smash your stuff, and make you a slave.
That'll change life, yeah. Yeah, well, any other questions about eunuchs? All right. Some of Jeremiah's visions and actions. These are some of the things that kind of give me a little bit of a framework, these long prophetic books where you get a lot of poetry and judgments, and it's hard to really know what's going on. Some of these visions and actions help. You guys remember any of them?
I remember the branch being significant.
Yeah, what kind of branch was it?
Almond branch.
Yep, almond branch. And what did it mean? Anybody remember? You almost had to read your little note at the bottom of your. Well, it's God watching over His word to perform it, and almond sounds like a wind or something like that. Watching.
I was wondering where they got that.
Yeah.
Where in the world?
There's some wordplay going on.
Said that as a play on words.
Mm-hmm. You get lots of wordplay in the Old Testament. Chapter 1, also in chapter 1, there's the vision of what? Yeah, a boiling pot facing away from the north. And what was the symbolism of the boiling pot? Judgment, yeah. Judgment being poured out from what direction?
From the north.
Yeah. From the north, and that's where Babylon was. They were north of Israel, and Egypt, of course, is to the south and to the west. And there's lots of references in Ezekiel. We'll get to this about enemies coming from the north, and Meshach and Tubal are names that are specifically mentioned, and sometimes contemporary people that like to think about future events will say, well, surely that's Russia, and then that's Moscow, and it's not intended to make us think of Russia, but rather, when Israel was attacked, it almost always came from the north. It was maybe Assyria attacking them, or it's Babylon, or it's Assyria attacking them. It almost always came from the north. Chapter 13, what did Jeremiah do? Has got it? What did he buy and bury?
Underwear.
Underwear or loincloth is
Oh, yeah.
the term I had. Yeah, and what was the prophetic message there?
Something like they were gonna wither like the underwear or something, pretty much,
More or
right?
less, yeah,
Like,
Israel was useless.
yeah, yep, worthless. And you know, with the loincloth, it mentions too of just like underwear clings to us. You know, God had made Judah to cling to him, but they didn't, and now they're worthless. And so, yeah, vivid imagery. About chapter 18. You watch a potter play, and what's the prophetic message? Yeah, God can do with his people as he pleases, kind of a thing. God works with his people. How about 19? He bought and broke a flask or a pot, yeah, something along those lines. And what was the prophetic meaning? Yeah, beyond repair. It's, of course, he could restore them, but you know, this wasn't not going to be an overnight fix for them. Oh, I gave the answer yet.
Yeah.
Anybody remember?
People who stayed and went.
Yeah, yep.
Stayed.
About 25. It's a vision of taking this cup of wine from the Lord's hand, and what was that significant of?
They have to drink this cup.
Yeah. This is God's wrath. I think against the nation. This, but you guys have probably picked up on by now. What was that a sign of, Trent? I put it in there, didn't I? Yeah.
Because they will return.
Yeah.
I'll be back.
Right. I think the book says he had an enterprising cousin who wanted to offload his property quickly, make a little bit off of it. But made him put his money where his mouth was. About 35. This is always a really interesting one to me. It looks like I didn't give you any blanks to fill in, but he offered wine to the Rechabites who refused on the grounds of obedience to their father. And what was the significance of that?
I know this just because I think like the first week of TPA, we talked about
Oh,
our
yeah, that's right. That's
drinking.
right. I referenced the Rechabites.
The Jonadabs were blessed for honoring the teachings of their fathers.
Yeah, the Rechabites, yeah.
Or, yeah.
Their father was Jonadab, yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, the point here was that they were willing to obey their father, their earthly father, and yet here God's people weren't willing to obey him. And if they were willing to obey their earthly father, surely God's people should obey their heavenly father. I was wondering about that too. What was the imagery? What did the would destroy Egypt? Yeah. All right. What's that?
So you brought it up. Only the Puritans can do that.
It's the thing when you get to know the Bible, and you know that's what's going to come to your mind all the time.
There was the
Yeah, my what I said to Trent was drinking is not necessarily wrong, but I came from a family where it was really taboo, and so I'm like the Rechabites. That's just the way I was raised. You know? Just follow the Lord's, my parents' direction in my life, and I don't drink. Like the Rechabites. And I tell our kids, I tell them, look, it's not wrong. That's just it's our deal.
You need to tell them it tastes disgusting.
No, you know.
No, then they'll be tempted to try it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I don't know if that ever stops anybody. Oh, everyone drinks this, but Dad said it tastes bad. It must be bad.
When I had a taste or two, I was like, I mean, even 21 is if you just drink, you're like, nope, not again.
Yeah.
And then you go out, your work friends are all drinking, and they try to convince you to drink a little. You drink one little drink, you're like, this is disgusting.
Nope. Well, a few other notes. Book of Jeremiah, as textbook pointed out, does not have a clear overarching structure. So, don't read the prophetic books again. Don't read it like a narrative. There could be things that are out of sequence, or it's not meant to be read as a chronological story. For me, there's something. Chapter 11, verse 14 says, especially in light of probably popular modern evangelical ideas about God's love and never being too late. For these people, it was too late, as Jackson said. There came a point where it was too late. There are points in the text where they're called upon to repent, and that judgment could be averted. But I think it's the textbook that points out that that's where some of it may be out of chronological order, because it seems like at one point in Jeremiah's ministry, there was still time to repent and avert judgment. But
when did Jeremiah start his mission, or his he started when the reign of Manasseh?
Josiah is what the text says.
Oh.
The book points out that by any of our reckonings, as we try to put dates on things, that he would have been really young by the reign of Josiah. So some people have said, well, maybe he was born during the reign of Josiah. The textbook says, well, that doesn't quite compute. He must have just been very young when he started his prophetic ministry. I love 17. My kids dream of being sick so they can lay around and watch movies or skip school. Jeremiah says, I've never desired the day of sickness. There's probably been days I have desired that day, but oh man, I'm just laying in bed for a while. But what an encouragement to us. We don't want to run away from what God's called us to. Now, maybe discover God hasn't called us to pastoral ministry. That's fine. Then we run towards whatever God has called us to, but we don't run away from God's calling on our life, or tap out prematurely or whatever it might be. Jim, you want to say something about Jeremiah 29:11? You love this one.
It was not written to high school.
Well said. But Jim, how would you? Is there a way that we can own this as a promise for ourselves?
I looked into it. I think that was my first sermon.
It might have been. I remember you preaching it. Now, I don't know. You might have done Romans 14 first.
No, I wanted to, but then I switched. Not that matters, but so what was your question now?
Well, so is this just not a promise for us at all? We don't get to claim it anyway. This is for the T-shirts. And
I don't think that we can claim it like was don't take it out of
context, because they're going to quote this a lot. Understand Babylon and Assyria and the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom. Otherwise, how can you ever understand a verse like this? But we can teach people that by God's sovereign hand, He brought judgment upon the Jewish nation, destroying the temple, destroying Jerusalem, bringing them into exile. But even then, He wasn't done with them, and He still had a plan for them, a plan to bring them back. A plan to bless them. And I think working, once we've gone there, we can work out from there and apply it to our own lives in various ways, saying, as God disciplines us, or, when we go through difficult times, it doesn't mean that that's the end for us as believers, but God's got a good plan for us. Of course, the believers that we're talking about, and, it'd be a different story for the unbelievers.
Difficult. It's not that I've taught it much, other than probably that verse.
Yeah, and probably all of these prophetic books are kind of
Right.
in the same boat. It's where I think, for me, totally agree with that. I think the open up to Jeremiah, and you could read a chapter and you can say, oh, well, this is chiefly in view until the second half of Isaiah. Then the Babylonians are in view, whereas Jeremiah has the Babylonians in view. So it kind of helps you. I think if we can distinguish a little bit, that helps them not to all blend together, and you can understand a little bit in books better. All right, let's go to Lamentations. Got a handy handout for this too that's really short. Not a lot to say about it.
I would say just it's amazing. Jeremiah too, he's an Old Testament scholar,
Yeah.
But anyway, just stuff like that always. Or like one more, because this one I actually wrote down. It was so encouraging to me. I wrote it to try to memorize it, but like Jeremiah 2:25, keep your feet from going unshod and your throat from thirst. It's Ephesians 6, man.
Yeah.
Shod with the gospel,
Yeah.
because he says, keep your feet from going unshod and your throat from thirst. Here's the connection with the gospel, but you said it is hopeless, for I have loved foreigners, and after them I will go. You know what I mean? It's like, that's the gospel is the opposite of that, man.
Yeah.
You say it's hopeless. I've been with foreigners. I'm going to keep going that way. He's saying, don't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, no, it is cool. It's fun. Or, Paul talking about boasting in the Lord, and, that's Jeremiah.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of Jeremiah stuff and just Old Testament stuff. I think even reading the Old Testament, like once you know the Old Testament pretty well, you start finding allusions or, things that start making more sense, references to Shiloh or Og and Sihon, or, even in Jeremiah, there's in Isaiah, there's a reference to the defeat of the Midianites that took place 500 years earlier in the period of Judges. And, you're able to start connecting more and more dots. And I think read the Bible in a way kind of becomes exciting again. You read through it, for a few years and several times, and then maybe it starts to get boring isn't the right word, but it can get dry, but we can come alive again to it as we start connecting those dots. All right, Lamentations. Has anybody read it in the last couple of months? Did you guys read it in the textbook?
Yes.
Awesome. Skimmed it. Okay. What did you guys take from the textbook? How about who does he say is the I of Lamentations? You get to chapter 3, and it says, I am the man who has seen affliction under the rod of his wrath. Who is that?
So it could be a few different.
Yeah.
It could be Jeremiah. It could be like corporate, like Israel, or personification of that. Whatever.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it gives a few other options. I think King Jehoiakim or something like that.
Yeah, some really weird.
Right.
What the heck, dude?
Yeah. And they land on, you've got to hear chapter 3 is Jerusalem personified. Guess you could argue about it, make your decision for yourself, but it seems like they're going to point out that it's a corporate lament. That's the first one is corporate. It's a corporate lament over fallen Jerusalem that acknowledges God's sovereign hand of judgment over the suffering and destruction. As Job grapples with individual suffering, Lamentations grapples with corporate suffering. Then, just keep going. Theological purpose, according to the textbook, is to acknowledge God's judgment, and then to pray to move God to restore his people. So it's like a confession, an acknowledgement of the judgment, and a hope that God would restore them, which God does. And then the first 4 chapters, what's the literary device that's used? You guys pick up on that? Yep. Everyone know what an acrostic is? Zach, you got acrostic down?
Acrostic, no.
That's when, like, if we took your name and said Zach, and then Z would be zany, and A would be artistic, and C would be charismatic, H would be happy. There'd be an acrostic. You know, in this case, it uses the Hebrew alphabet, 22 letters, right, Jackson? So every line of each chapter starts with, there's 22 verses. Except for, yeah, chapter 5. Yeah, each. Yeah.
I don't know if it is, but I'm asking. Is it the Hebrew alphabet? The acrostic?
Yeah, I think so. I didn't look it up in the Hebrew, but.
I was wondering if it says 22, isn't that how many? That's 1850 or some.
Yeah,
119.
119, yeah.
Only the first 4 chapters are the acrostic.
Yep.
Fifth one is still 22 verses.
Yeah. Still sort of had the acrostic formula in mind a little bit, but not as an acrostic yet. Lamentation 3, 23, we're really familiar with that, right? Steadfast love of the Lord. This is probably about the only thing anyone knows from Lamentations. Steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. We sing that all the time. Lord is my portion, says my soul, therefore I will hope in him. One of those allusions. Chapter 4, verse 21 noted, rejoice and be glad, O daughter of Edom, you who dwell in the land of Uz, but to you also the cup shall pass, and you shall become drunk and strip yourself bare. You remember, talked a lot about Obadiah, not a lot, but how it's a woe against Edom, and how the Edomites were plundering the Jewish nation in this time and cheering on the Babylonians. And we get a word of judgment against them. Their time is coming too. All right, that's all I've got for us. Anybody else have anything they want to say?
Were we supposed to read through Ezekiel for this week?
No.
Oh.
You read Ezekiel?
Yeah. Actually, that's the most of my time.
Oh no! For real?
It's been 10 minutes.
Well, actually, it might be worth saying just so people think about it for next week.
It's a big one.
Well,
And then
I got a cousin who's really tied in deep with a Hebrew roots cult, basically. And they go to Ezekiel and like the prophecy on chapters 39 through 40 about the new temple and New Jerusalem. So they keep every Old Testament law and stuff. And it's really goofy, but I actually just had a conversation with him this weekend at a wedding, and he was talking about how him and his brothers went to Israel, and he's like, oh, I'm so excited to start working on the new temple, stuff like that. It's really weird. So I was actually, well,
now you'll be pumped all week.
yeah.
We'll talk about that stuff for sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's Ezekiel and Daniel for next time. And then Babylonian era, chapter 8. You read the Assyrian era. Jason did anyway this week. By the way, that ESV Bible Atlas, if you guys aren't reading it, it really is a great resource. The articles in it, this really helps summarize a lot of the historical stuff really well and shed a little bit more light on it. And we've only got 3 sessions left. And the last session, we're mostly just going to take the test. So we are getting down to the end. Yeah, we'll do something to celebrate. Yeah, sure. Yeah. That's the Mexican restaurant if it was still open.
I was gonna say, I'm now the weekend on.
I know, there's no other place like really excited to go to. Pizza Ranch is, what?
That's like my favorite restaurant.
I know.
I like these rooms too, man. El Tapatio going out. That's a bad deal right there.
Yeah.
We're gonna lose a couple thousand people.
El Tapatio.
Yeah. It's not Tapatio, dude.
Is that done? El Tapatio, have they thrown in the towel?
Yeah,
That's a bummer.
it is a big bummer. Well, yeah, test is coming up, so there's no essays for you guys to do anymore because I know the last week, you just need some time to focus on the test. I'll probably, I will try to whip up the 2018 test, maybe this week or next, and I'll give it to you with all the answers, and you guys will be able to just focus on what's going to be on there for sure, because I always figure the goal is to know the info, so I don't mind you having the answer ahead of time because you're working on the answer then, so that's what it's all about. All right.
Where were you in college?
I know, right?
Chapter 3 is what personified?
Jerusalem.
And we can get a group together and buy that thing and start it over. We're not Mexican, so we could do it.
Yeah. James Randall. Telling him he needs to figure it out. All right, Ross, do you want to pray for us? Ross? Ross? Ross.
Right at the prayer.
Oh, Jim's moving.
Right on time.
He's like, they asked me to pray, hold real still. That's hilarious.
That was so impressive.
It's like
all those guys in the city who paints himself.
Looks to me like he's trying to do mind control on us.
I went to
Yeah.
I went to a museum where someone was standing still when I was a kid, and then I touched them. They're like, "What?" I was like, "I thought you were like,
oh man,
a clay figure."
Do you think we're frozen on Ross's screen?
Right. Wow. Well, Ross, if you haven't figured out, your screen is frozen. You're seeing us. I don't know if you are. All right, who wants to pray to close us? Jackson, you want the honors?
Sure. Lord, thank you for when Andy teaches this Old Testament material. Thank you for his knowledge, and I pray that we would all yearn for learning and keeping that knowledge, that it would all stay with us and be with us as we walk in our lives with you, and even as we read the New Testament, God, and all about your Son, that we would see the allegiance and see how it all connects. God, your word is such a unified book, God. It's not just the New Testament, it's also the Old Testament. And thank you for that, and pray for all of us this week that we would all stay close with you and we bless our ministries and just bless our families and the rest of the week to go well. In Jesus' name, amen. Huzzah. Huzzah.
Yeah.
Huzzah.
Huzzah. It sounds like.
This was my Bible. It was sitting right beside my bed on the ground when my house flooded. So it was actually pretty much totally soggy. It's gonna get.
Said he lost.
Right.